Welcome back, everybody. For today's deep dive, we're going to be looking at Sandra Bothe and Thriving Mindsets, LLC.
Okay.
Now, what really caught my eye was that she specifically works with corporate and entrepreneurial immigrants.
Yeah.
And I'm really curious to hear what that actually means.
I think it's a term that speaks to anybody who has ventured out of their comfort zone to build a new life,
Right.
a new career, and they face a lot of hurdles along the way.
And what I think is really interesting about Sandra is that she brings her own experience to this. As a first-generation Latina, she's experienced those pressures to prove yourself.
Yeah.
And, kind of navigate a world where belonging isn't necessarily automatic.
Right.
And her work really centers around this idea that belonging is not an invitation. It's something we create.
That's powerful. I'm really interested to dive into that. What does that mean? How did she come to that?
Yeah, I'm really interested in that too.
Yeah.
So let's start with her journey. She started out in corporate America. She had a ton of drive, but quickly ran into self-doubt and that pressure to conform.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the turning point for her? What led her to this idea of creating belonging rather than waiting for it?
Well, I think that pivotal moment for her was realizing that success wasn't about fitting in or changing who she was.
Okay.
It was about owning her own strengths and using her voice. And that was the start of her creating her own sense of belonging.
Yeah, I love that. It's not about blending in.
Yeah.
It's about knowing your value and what you bring to the table.
Absolutely.
And that's really what she helps others do through Thriving Mindsets.
Yeah.
She focuses on people who struggle with, fear of speaking up.
Okay.
Feeling that constant need to prove themselves.
Right.
And getting stuck because of self-doubt.
Yeah, and I think these are all really common obstacles for a lot of corporate and entrepreneurial immigrants.
Okay.
I mean, just think about it. These are people that have left behind everything familiar to start fresh, often in a corporate world that doesn't always understand their background.
Yeah.
Or the struggles they've had to overcome.
Okay, so now I'm starting to see the picture more clearly.
Yeah.
So we're talking about people that are navigating cultural differences, new professional environments, and even just trying to figure out how their identity fits into this whole new context.
Right.
So no wonder there's self-doubt involved.
Right.
So how does Thriving Mindsets help people overcome these hurdles?
Well, she uses a combination of mindset transformation strategies and NLP techniques to help clients build confidence, move past uncertainties, and really get in alignment with what they want in their career.
Okay, so hold on. What exactly is NLP?
Yeah.
I know it stands for neuro-linguistic programming, but I need a little more.
It's basically understanding the connection between our thoughts, our language, and our behavior.
Okay.
And Sandra uses these techniques to help people reframe their negative self-talk, create those positive internal narratives, and that foundation for success. It's really about changing how we communicate with ourselves, which then affects our actions and the outcomes.
So it's like changing the script in your head.
Absolutely.
Which can then impact how you actually experience the world.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. And this really ties into her upcoming book, Unmuting Myself. A voice silenced by doubt rises to inspire.
Right.
It sounds like it's all about finding that voice
Exactly.
and stepping into your own power.
Yeah, the book chronicles her journey overcoming self-doubt and learning to own her voice, and offers really practical strategies and insights for readers to apply to their own lives.
That's great. And it's interesting how her own venture into public speaking kind of mirrors that message.
Oh, definitely.
And she's going to be speaking at D.A. Beek's Talks and Amplify Voices on May 16th.
Yeah.
Which aims to provide a platform for voices that have been historically silenced.
Right.
So it seems like she really walks the talk.
She does. And she even found her initial voice in public speaking through LinkedIn audio events.
Oh, wow. She had a show called The Journey of Corporate Professional Immigrants and Entrepreneurs.
Okay.
So it all comes back to that idea. Belonging is not an invitation. It's something we create.
Yeah.
She's living proof of that.
Okay. So I'm starting to see how all the pieces fit together. So it's not just about positive thinking.
Yeah.
It's about taking concrete steps to create a space where you belong and where your voice is heard.
Absolutely.
But what does that actually look like in practice?
Well, that's what we're going to delve into next. We'll explore how she helps clients develop that confidence, overcome uncertainty, and really start creating that sense of belonging that they're looking for.
Great. I'm excited to hear more.
Yeah, me too.
So we'll be right back after a short break.
Welcome back. Before we jump into the specifics of how Sandra approaches this with Thriving Mindsets, let's recap a little about what we've learned about these corporate and entrepreneurial immigrants.
Yeah, it's important to remember those unique challenges that they face.
We're talking about people who are navigating new cultures,
Yeah.
new professional environments, and even their own sense of identity.
Yeah, it's a lot to process.
It is.
And you can see how self-doubt can easily creep in.
Right.
Especially when you're trying to find your place in a world that's not familiar.
Absolutely. So let's talk about how thriving mindsets helps people overcome those hurdles.
Okay.
Earlier, we talked about NLP.
Yeah.
But I'd love to dig in a little deeper into how Sandra uses it specifically to build confidence.
Yeah, so one of the core principles of NLP is that our thoughts, language, and behaviors, they're all interconnected.
Right.
And by changing the way we think and talk about ourselves, we can change our actions and ultimately our outcomes.
So if you change the internal dialogue, you change the external reality.
Absolutely.
How does that work in practice?
Well, she helps people identify and reframe their limiting beliefs.
Okay.
So those are those negative thought patterns that hold them back. So for example, if someone's always telling themselves, I'm not good enough,
Right.
Sandra would help them change that to, I am capable and I deserve success.
So it's about consciously choosing more empowering beliefs and kind of repeating them until they become your new normal.
Exactly.
But it's more than just positive affirmations.
Right. It's about understanding the patterns in our thinking and our behavior and using these techniques to shift them.
Okay.
So for instance, she might use a technique called anchoring, where she helps clients associate positive feelings with certain situations or actions, which can be so powerful for managing things like anxiety or fear.
Yeah, that sounds really practical and useful.
It is.
Especially for people who struggle with speaking up or taking risks.
Yeah.
It's like creating a mental shortcut to confidence.
It is. And it all comes back to her idea that belonging is not an invitation. It's something we create. So by developing a more empowering internal dialogue and building that confidence through these techniques, her clients can really start creating that sense of belonging.
It's about taking ownership.
Yes.
And not waiting for permission to be seen and heard.
Exactly.
I'm curious, are there other strategies that she uses to help people with their mindset?
Yeah, she talks a lot about the importance of identifying and challenging that negative self-talk.
Okay.
Because a lot of times we don't even realize how much that inner critic is holding us back.
Right.
She also encourages people to focus on their strengths and accomplishments rather than dwelling on those perceived weaknesses.
So shifting that focus from what's wrong to what's right.
Yeah.
Acknowledging those wins and building on them.
Exactly. And she helps people visualize their success.
Okay.
So by creating that clear picture in their mind of what they want to achieve, they can start to believe in their ability to make it happen.
As they say, see it, believe it, achieve it. But it's not always as easy as just flipping a switch and thinking positively right.
Right.
It's got to be more to it than that.
It does take effort and practice to change those ingrained thought patterns.
Right.
And this is where her expertise as a mindfulness coach comes in.
Okay.
Because she helps her clients develop that awareness of their thoughts and feelings, which allows them to make more conscious choices about how they're going to respond to the challenges they face.
So being present in the moment and recognizing those negative thought patterns as they come up, rather than just letting them take over, I can see how that would be really empowering.
Yeah.
But we haven't talked a lot about the emotional release part of her hypnotherapy practice.
That's true. That's a great point. Hypnotherapy is really powerful because it lets you access that subconscious mind.
Okay.
Where a lot of those deep fears and limiting beliefs live.
Right.
So it allows for a really deep level of transformation and healing, and it helps people release those emotional blocks.
Yeah. Okay. That might be keeping them from experiencing true confidence and that sense of belonging.
So it's about addressing those deeper emotional wounds that might be fueling the self-doubt.
Exactly.
It sounds like a very holistic approach.
It is.
Combining the mindset work, the NLP, and the hypnotherapy to create lasting change.
Yeah, and it's clear from her client testimonials that this combination is really effective.
Okay.
People talk about feeling more confident, more empowered, and more capable of going after what they want after working with her.
So it sounds like she's giving people a toolbox of techniques to create that change in their lives.
Yeah.
It's not one size fits all.
Absolutely. And I think that's what makes her work so impactful.
Yeah.
Because she really empowers her clients to be participants in their own transformation.
Right.
They're not just passively taking advice.
Right.
They're learning to take control of their thoughts, feelings, and actions.
It's about giving them the power to create their own sense of belonging.
Yeah, which is such a powerful message, especially for people who might be feeling like outsiders in their new environment.
Absolutely. And I think Sandra's work is just this reminder that we all have the ability to create a space where we feel seen, heard, and valued.
Right.
And that's a message that can resonate with anyone, no matter their background or experiences.
This has been really insightful. I'm starting to really understand the depth of her approach.
Yeah.
And how it goes way beyond just thinking positively.
It's about giving people those tools and those strategies
Right.
to create real change in their lives.
Right.
And it all starts with that belief that belonging is not an invitation, it's something we create.
That's great. Well, I'm really looking forward to continuing our conversation after the break. Welcome back to our deep dive with Sandra Bothe and Thriving Mindsets. We've talked about a lot, mindset shifts, NLP techniques, even hypnotherapy. But for our listeners, what are the key takeaways that they can actually start applying in their own lives?
Yeah, that's a good question. How do we take all this and make it actionable?
Right. What are those concrete steps that someone can take to start creating that sense of belonging that Sandra talks about?
Well, the first step is understanding that belonging is really an inside job.
Okay.
It's not about waiting for that invitation or seeking approval from others.
Right.
It's about building that self-worth and recognizing your own inherent value.
So start with acknowledging your strengths and talents.
Exactly. And once you start to see your worth, then you can show up with more confidence and be more authentic.
Okay.
And that might mean, speaking up more in meetings.
Uh-huh.
Or pursuing those opportunities that you've had your eye on.
Right.
Or just expressing yourself more openly.
It's about taking ownership of your voice and your space.
Yes.
Not being afraid to share your ideas, even if they're different.
Absolutely. And remember, belonging is not an invitation. It's something we create. So if you feel like an outsider, don't wait for someone to let you in. You create your own sense of belonging.
So connect with people who share your values.
Yes.
Find those communities and build those relationships where you feel seen and heard.
Exactly. I mean, look at Sandra's journey into public speaking, especially with LinkedIn audio events.
Right.
She didn't wait for an invitation. She just created her own space.
And provided a place for all those corporate and entrepreneurial immigrants to connect and support each other.
Exactly.
It's inspiring to see how she took her own experiences and turned it into a way to help others.
It really is.
So as a final piece of advice, what would you say to our listeners who are trying to create that sense of belonging?
I would just say, remember that confidence is like a muscle. You have to exercise it. Don't be afraid to step outside your comfort zone.
Even if it feels a little uncomfortable.
Exactly. Every time you push past that self-doubt, you build confidence and create a greater sense of belonging.
That's so true. And what if you face setbacks? What should you do?
Don't give up. See those as opportunities to learn and grow.
I love that. So it all goes back to that idea that belonging is not an invitation, it's something we create. That's a great message to end on. We all have the power to create a life where we feel connected and valued and empowered.
We really do.
And if you're ready to start that journey, Sandra Bothe and Thriving Mindsets has a ton of resources and support to offer.
Absolutely. You can find her on LinkedIn or visit her website.
And we'll make sure to include those links in our show notes.
Perfect.
Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Thriving Mindsets. We hope you leave feeling inspired and ready to create your own sense of belonging.
Yes. And until next time, remember to embrace your uniqueness, celebrate your strengths, and never stop creating those spaces where you feel like you belong.
That's a wrap on this episode of The Deep Dive. See you next time.